7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Westfield City Council meeting for June 8th will come to order. Cindy, will you call the roll for us?
Troy Patton.
Here.
Scott Fry.
Here.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Here.
Jake Gilbert.
Here.
Scott Willis.
Here.
Mike Johns.
Here.
Joe Edwards. Is Joe Edwards on?
Joe is absent.
All right, thank you. We do have a quorum.
Excellent. So my apologies as we get things started. There was a lot of last minute shuffling and changes to the agenda. And hopefully what we have here in front of us is the most up-to-date version as of, I believe, 5 o'clock p.m. this evening. Are there any questions or concerns around the agenda?
Yeah, this is Mike Johns. I know I'm concerned. I'm not seeing the Junction PUD amendment on the agenda. And I know that's something that we had voted on the APC last Wednesday. I've had several petitioners, or really rather Westfield folks call me today asking me what was going to happen tonight. So I think there's a lot of people who expect to see that on the agenda. So I would like to, unless there's a good reason, I'd like to entertain a vote to put that back onto the agenda this evening.
This is Scott. Brian Birch had contacted me on Sunday asking for that to be pulled. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's a piece of legislation that he initiated. It's right for council consideration, and it's actually under a 90-day time period once it's voted on by the Plan Commission. He can ask that it be pulled, but when he said that, does he mean continued, or he no longer wants the council to entertain it because he's withdrawing the petition?
He was very clear to me that he was not withdrawing it, but wanted some additional time before it went to vote.
I understand. I think Mike's motion is well-founded. It is ripe to be considered. If Mike's motion carries, I believe you can vote on it tonight. I mean, whether it's on the agenda or not is kind of a moving target. We even state that our agenda can be amended.
Do we have to vote to put it back on, or we just put it back on? I've never seen this before. So what's the proper procedure?
I'm hearing some conversations I can't quite clearly hear.
Yeah, let me say that again. Do we have to vote to put it back on, or can we just say it's back on for a vote? How does that work?
I think you can, Mike can make the motion to entertain this ordinance as well as his recommendation as to what to do with it all in one motion. And then the one vote would be for both.
So one more time. So we make a motion to put it on the agenda, or we make a motion to vote on it as is? Or both?
I think Mike's motion would best be written out as that he moves to consider ordinance, and the number is escaping me, ordinance so-and-so tonight, and he moves to approve or deny it.
What we are against putting it back on, but we may vote differently for the project. What if I have one no vote and one yes vote, or vice versa? Brian, why would we do that?
Well, I presuppose that if you put it back on the agenda, you're ready to vote on it. Right. And if you didn't want to vote one way or the other, just vote no and nothing happens tonight.
But then we've already voted on this project. That's why I thought this was two separate things. A vote to get it back on the agenda is what Scott's asking, and then a vote on the project itself separately. But Brian, you're saying we should join them? Shouldn't we vote?
Well, it doesn't have to be on the agenda for you to act upon something. If you have an agenda, you have to post it. And the only reason you have an agenda is if you plan to work from it. Now, Mike is making this suggestion that he wants to vote on something not on the agenda now. So he would like to open the motion to entertain ordinance, whatever it is, and make his recommendation. He can make that motion.
Really? Oh, crap. See?
So let me ask you this, Brian. If Birch wants to, if we vote no on this project, hypothetically speaking, it kills this, and then it goes back, reverts back to the original PUD, what would be the disadvantage? Because I'm always sensitive to having developers and businesses invest in our process and then bog them down with more money and commitment in a process. If we vote no on the project, did Birch have an opportunity to go back to APC, or is this, it has nowhere to go but city council at this point?
Nowhere to go but city council. If you voted down at this point, he would have to resubmit a different plan and start at the very beginning. Now, going back to Jake's comment, if someone wants to ask Mike to change his motion to just whether or not to entertain it tonight, you can bifurcate it, certainly. I just thought that doing one was leading to the other, and I thought I was reading what Mike wanted to do. And I apologize if I suggested something that isn't what he was planning to do.
Well, I would, if that motion's made, I don't think it's appropriate. Just like there's people who are wanting to see this, there's people now that it's been taken off who aren't here to witness this. So I don't think it's appropriate. So I would make a motion to not add it to the agenda because there's people who expected it. I mean, to me, that's a lack of transparency. If we take something off and people thought, oh, well, I won't tune in because that's not on there now, and then we take action on that, I think that that's the opposite of transparency. I'm okay with us making any vote with anything as advertised, but I mean, with that not being on here, there could, I would say there could be people who aren't on here tonight because they thought that's not going to be discussed.
I understand that, Jake, and the argument works the other way too, that it was on the agenda for the majority of the time since the Plan Commission meeting. So I guess you can proceed however it is that you wish to proceed. I guess what I'm telling you is you can do what you want to do, however that is. And I'm not sure if Mike already made a motion or not. But if not, it appears though you have.
Yeah, I guess my issue is, and this is probably it's probably unique to me, but when Birch called me, I was supposed to talk to Dr. Great about this PUD, and we didn't have the conversation, so I don't know her side of the discussion. But I just told her, hey, it's coming off the agenda, so we don't need to have the conversation. But I you know, Mike, you certainly have the ability to make the motion if you want. Is there any other comments before a motion is made from any of the other counselors or? All right, hearing none. Mike, do you want to make a motion at this time, or?
Yes, I do. I would like to make a motion to entertain ordinance number 2005 PUD 04, the Junction PUD Amendment 4, this evening, and vote it and take a vote on that project.
Do I have a second?
Cindy Spoljarek.
So we've got a first by Mike Johns. We have a second by Cindy Spoljarek. Cindy, would you like to call the roll, please?
Okay, this is ordinance 20-13, correct?
No, this is to bring it back onto the agenda for a vote
Right.
on, at a later time when we get to old business.
But are you adding ordinance 2013 back on the agenda tonight? I just need what ordinance number you're talking about.
The ordinance number is
13?
I believe so. Yes, 20-13 Junction PUD Amendment 4.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
All
right.
right, Mike John made a motion.
Yeah, sorry, Cindy, this is Troy. Hey, Brian, just real quick. So are we voting for both the motion and the project all at once? Or what are we doing here? Sorry. I just want to make sure I know.
Excuse me, this is Mike. My motion was just to bring it up for vote this evening.
Right.
Vote yea or nay, and at that point then to have a second motion at that point.
Yes, okay, so we're moving on to the vote then. Is that correct, Brian?
No, we're not.
Is that,
I don't think this is fair.
I think Mike's motion is to just consider it tonight, and I'll leave it to Scott where that goes, whether it's considered right away or placed in old business.
Okay.
Okay, Mike made a motion to consider ordinance 20-13 tonight, and Cindy Spalgeri seconded. So now we need a motion for somebody to approve the ordinance 20-13, and then a second for that, if that's what you're gonna do.
No, what I think we're doing is we're just simply voting on putting it back on the agenda, and then I will call that ordinance at a later time when we get to old business in the meeting.
Okay, all right, so, okay.
I hate
Wow.
to be,
All right.
okay, this is Troy, sorry, I hate to be ignorant. So, I mean, we had a motion, we had a second, so now we're moving on to the vote, because we've already had a motion and a second, correct, Brian? I mean, we don't have to vote to whether we agree with the motion or not. I mean, that's already been done. You had a first, a second, done. Now we're going on to the vote, correct?
To vote on whether to consider it tonight.
Right,
Okay, all right. So we're voting whether to put it tonight.
Yes.
right.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, man. Sorry.
No, that's, okay, so.
You had it clearer than I did, Troy.
Okay, Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
No,
Scott Willis.
No,
Okay, so okay, Cindy Spalgeri,
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 4-2.
all righty, so let's move on for approval of the minutes from City Council meeting on May 11th, 2020. Are there any corrections or additions that need to be made to the meeting minutes? Hearing
Motion
none.
to-
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve, Cindy Spalgeri.
We have a second?
Yes, Troy Patton.
So we have a first from Cindy, a second from Troy. Cindy, will you call the roll, please?
Okay, Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeri,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Appreciate it, Cindy. Next up, claims. Any questions or comments on the claims? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the claims as presented?
Motion to approve, Troy Patton.
Do we have a second? This is Scott Willis, I'll second it. Having a first and a second, Cindy, would you call the roll?
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeri,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All righty, miscellaneous business, special presentations. Cheryl Solar, are you on the line?
I am.
I understand that you have something to present to the council. It's your mic.
Okay. Mayor Andy Cook and the Westfield City Council members, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Westfield Washington Public Library, I would like to extend our sincere thanks for your financial support of a check in the amount of $140,000 to cover some of the library's current capital project expenses. As we outlined in our request for the funds, the Westfield Washington Public Library's revenue stream has been reduced in the last 10 years as the growth of Westfield has exploded. The library's second largest revenue stream, local option income tax, has been reduced due to legislative changes. So while the community continues to grow, the library is struggling to keep up with the demand of providing quality library services to the Westfield community. Per your request, the funds have been used to date are as follows. We upgraded our indoor lighting to LED in the amount of $13,053.33. We have a professional assessment of the current facility and community visioning process for the future of library services in the amount of $43,914.61. We've also given our Westfield Library Foundation ramp-up funds of $5,000. So total spent to date is $61,967.94. The other projects we have under consideration is the remainder of the professional assessment of the current facility and community visioning process. We are hoping to create a digital lab in the library, repair a bay window area in the back of the library, and we are looking at RFID technology for our library materials. Thank you again for your support of the Westfield Washington Public Library as we strive to provide the best possible library services for the residents of the city of Westfield and Washington Township. We thank you.
Appreciate it, Cheryl. Moving on, Jake, I know you've got some comments you want to make around diversity, equity, and inclusion in the city of Westfield.
Yeah, just wanted to point out all the feedback I got was that we had a great demonstration here in Westfield. There's obviously been demonstrations, there's been protests, riots all over the country, but just wanted to say it was a great demonstration from everything I've heard. I talked to a young African-American male today who's a student in our school, and his words to me were, we were just amazed at how well we were supported and way beyond what we expected, and they had great praise for police. Just a wonderful thing, and just wanted to point that out. And I also wanted to praise Todd Bertrand. You know, I think when things like this happen, the society we live in, if you don't post something immediately on like Facebook or whatever explaining your stance, and it's almost as if you don't care, which to me, you could be a complete racist and post on Facebook. But I want to point out that, you know, Todd has released a few videos on behalf of the city, and it would be easy to think that that's all reactionary to what's happened with George Floyd. But the honest truth is, I met with Todd 6 months ago. He's encouraged me to take a class that I've taken, some follow-up to some things he's done when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I believe Todd's been working on this for about 16 months. And I just wanted to say that because I think it would be easy to take the approach like, oh, well, now Westfield's going to take notice. Now Westfield's going to do something. But we are trying. We got a long way to go, and we're working at it. So I would just like to say, you know, in terms of something from the city, I believe when things like this happen, you can react with indifference and not care. You can react with distraction and point to stats, and you know, but you know what, stats say flying is safer, but I don't always feel that way either. So sometimes stats can not really justify how people feel, or you can point to other issues. It's easy for us, I think, here to be relative and say, well, you know, I'm not racist. I don't see color. But, you know, I don't think it's always enough to just not be racist. I think you have to be anti-racist. If I'm not a child abuser, but if I see child abuse going on, I'm going to step in. And sometimes I'm not sure we always step in when racism happens. And I also believe it's easy in our bubble to say, well, you know, hey, I know this African-American friend of mine, he's pulled himself up by the bootstraps and he's doing great, and why can't everyone else? And I think it's just, sometimes things are so great in our community, we can't see the forest from the trees. And by doing so, we don't always acknowledge, well, that maybe that person is doing great, but that doesn't mean that they haven't had to fight through some headwinds that someone else didn't. And so it's just really, you know, the other way would be just self-awareness, just listening and being able to look at yourself and listen to others and find out, well, how do you feel about the situation? What is the reality, instead of being dismissive? And I would just encourage that. I think that our demonstration was just a great example of that, for 250 people to do that. So as we move forward, you know, we can say that the Westfield of today is clearly a result of the last 5, 10, 15 years of procedures and habits and systems, and the Westfield 10 years from now will be based on what we do today. So there will certainly be some change that comes from doing something like the demonstration, and there'll be some small change that probably won't be real lasting. And then we can obviously look at our procedures, and I think that that's what Todd is talking about doing, is looking at systems of housing and lending and education and policing and government and various things to make sure we're being just and fair and inclusive. But ultimately, you know, the biggest change is just identity, and that's the deepest form of change. And so I think in our city, we're wanting to be rooted in the solution and not just fix racism and prejudice, but actually raise up people who aren't racist and aren't prejudiced. Not saying that we are, but just making sure that that's a goal, that we do that for each other, and that we really become a place where we truly love each other. And this is such a wonderful city, and I was, I guess, proud that we had the peaceful demonstration that we did, and just wanted to show some love to the people who were involved in setting that up. And that's all. So thank you very much.
All right, moving on. John Rogers, I know you were up to give us an update on our first quarter financials.
Yes, the document you have in front of you, it's on the screen, is the appropriation summary report that was shared with the Finance Committee earlier. And I'll just give you a brief overview of this this document so that it's understandable, because sometimes they could get a little confusing. So to start with, over on the far left is the fund, in this case the general fund. If you look at the top, it tells you that it's an appropriation summary. The date range is the first quarter. And then you see the larger budget versus actual columns. Under the budget columns are the forwarded encumbrances, dollars appropriated in the prior year, but the project or activity is not completed, and the council encumbered it forward into the next budget year. We don't do a lot of that, as you can see, but it is tracked. Current, that's the adopted budget. Transfer, additional, and adjustment, these are just categories for tracking changes to the adopted budget. Under the actual columns, you see the PO encumbrances, those are contracted expenses, and then expended quarter to date and expended year to date. Track the cumulative activity from the current quarter and year to date. Outside the budget and actual columns are the calculations. The unexpended budget balance subtracts the total budgeted expenses, which is the sum of the forwarded encumbrances, current, transfer, additional, and adjustments from the actual year-to-date expense. Does not include the PO encumbrances because they've not been invoiced yet. And then you have the percentage over or under budget, which states the percentage over or under of the expenditures for that line of the report. One of the things that was talked about during the meeting with the Finance Committee in using this draft, this report you have in front of you, was about notes and making those notes part of the record document. I know that Scott had talked about footnotes and also covered a couple of other suggestions. I know that Troy also mentioned he would like to have the Finance Committee put their notes in the final document, and I think we do have to come up with a process for that. And I always refer to those as variance reports. I don't know if that's what you guys would call those, but I would suggest that those notes are basically your variance notes, and they're telling you what the variance is and why the numbers don't tick and tie the way you might think they would. So that document would be the official document, which would include the notes. But we, at this point, we're still working on putting that together, and hope to have that as part of the Q2 report. Really, I didn't have a whole lot of other comments at this time, other than the revenues are coming in really a little bit better than we thought they would, given the current situation. A lot of that's due to higher than anticipated due to the commercial development in those categories of fire inspection fees, park impact fees, road impact fees, and storm erosion fees. So those things are tracking a little bit over where you should be, where we thought we would be, I should say, where we thought we would be at this time. The property tax receipts, we'll have a better idea what that's going to look like towards the end of summer, and that would also go for the food and beverage. Right now, we currently expect our 2019 certified lit to be right where we expected it to be, because it was certified last year, and they're basically passing that through this year. I really didn't have anything else at this time.
Hey, Scott, if I could just jump in here. Hey, John, this is Troy.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank you guys for putting this together. And just so the public knows, it's not that I understand that, it's here we are in June and we're going through the first quarter. And frankly, John, Tammy, and Todd, they were prepared to do this even at the last meeting. Everything was put together. We just didn't get everything together. So that's on us. And going forward, obviously, we will do this a little bit quicker, probably in the meeting, subsequent to the Finance Committee meeting. But like I said, this is not on John, Tammy, or Todd. They had all this done, prior to the last City Council meeting, and it is a work in progress. And we're gonna keep making this better and a little more robust. So hopefully the taxpayers can understand everything a little bit better as we continue to move forward. So thanks, John.
Oh, you're welcome. And again, I know you and Todd have been having a lot of conversations about the work falling back on the clerk and the clerk treasurer's office, and so that'll be very helpful with our financial analysts leaving. So, but we'll do whatever needs to be done to get this across the finish line.
Yeah, and Cindy, I don't want to dismiss your group too. You guys did an awesome job also helping us out, put everything together too. So again, I just want to thank everybody. And like I said, I'm confident we're going to get better and better at this as we go. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions from other council members? Or all right, hearing none. Thanks, John. Appreciate the presentation.
You're welcome.
Next on our miscellaneous business list is some exciting news that I think we're going to allow the mayor to make. So, Mayor Cook, if you got the mic.
Hey, thank you very much, Scott. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, here we are in some rather challenging times with businesses all over, and Westfield finds itself in the company of a brand new endeavor that has chosen to, I believe there you'll see some videos that say that this is going to be their forever home. The organization is SEP. They are moving here from Carmel, and here to tell you more about it is their CEO, Rahman Ori, and their COO, a Westfield resident, in Tracy Dossett. So welcome, you two. Welcome your company. We're thrilled to have you, and show us what you intend to do.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Cook. Thank you, Council, for having us on this evening. I love that it was tagged as exciting announcement because it's very exciting for our company. I'm not sure, Kevin, if you're running the slides, if you want to go ahead to the next one, that's perfect. There's our faces since you can't see us. Tracy Dossett, I've lived here in Westfield for 20 years. I'm excited to hopefully be bringing SEP here. I'm going to hand it over to Rahman, our president and CEO. We've worked together for 27 years at SEP, and he's going to just give you kind of some highlights of who we are.
Thanks, Tracy. And thank you, Mayor Cook and councilors. You'll go on to the next slide. We have a hard time getting braggy. We're a pretty low-key bunch, but I'm gonna try and dial it up for you here for a minute and tell you why we're excited and why you should be excited. So SEP is a software company, and more or less we build other people's products. So if you made a tractor and you wanted that tractor to become self-driving, you might call us. If you made medical devices that needed to share data with clinicians or caregivers, if you made aircraft engines and wanted to be able to predict when they need service, things like that. These are all things that we do for companies. We've been around a long time for a software company, 32 years this year. And it's been a pretty cool story. We've never been a company that tried to grow fast. We've always focused on doing great work. We have customers that we've kept for 30 years. And done this kind of technical work for them. It's a cool Indiana story. The company was founded here by 4 grads from Rose-Hulman, and has always made a point of attracting and retaining students from the amazing schools here. So we recruit very heavily from Purdue, from Rose, from IU, Taylor, IUPUI, you name it. And we get these kids, we teach them the craft, and then they stick around. So typical tenure in the tech world is on the order of 2, maybe 3 years. Our average maker tenure right now is about 9 years, and our managers have stuck around for 20 plus. We're pretty cognizant of how lucky we are to have this company and the way tech has surged. And so we've made a big point of investing back in the community as well. And we have a number of causes that we support. One of them is Student Impact of Westfield. Tracy is the proud representative there. We also work with Gleaners and Camptown and JDRF and a number of other organizations, just trying to give back some of the good fortune that we've received. The folks we hire, like I said, are often fresh out of school. They stick around. They start families. Quite a few are already in the Westfield area, and more will come. And they, if I might be so bold, they're the people you want in your neighborhood. You're going to see them out at those community events, working for causes. You're going to see them volunteering at the schools. You're going to see them in youth sports and growing their families and laying down roots here in Westfield. And SEP is going to do that too. So we're not just coming in to lease this. We are 50-50 partners in the whole project. So when we say forever home, we mean it. We're going to invest in this and grow this out for the long haul. So Tracy's going to tell you a little bit more about the project itself. but I just wanted you to have an idea who your future neighbors are going to be.
Yeah. Thanks, Roman. Kevin, you want to go ahead and go to the next slide for me? So this is our proposed campus. And again, this is at 161st Street on the southeast corner of 161st and US 31. Beautiful site. You know, Mayor Cook mentioned and Roman too, our forever home. I should have sent the video because it's awesome. It's how we did our announcement to our employees because they just found out a little over a week and a half or so ago. They're all very excited. But it was such a unique site, and it's beautiful and it's wooded, and our intent is to keep that 20 acres with as many trees and wildlife as we can. So again, preserving what's there and making it a great gateway into Westfield. So our plan, we are on the south portion of this, in that 70,000 square foot office building. We currently have about 143 employees. This will allow us to grow to 300. And there is obviously some availability on the north piece there. We do own, like Roman said, 50% of the entire development. So if we wanted to expand or attract another company to come in there, obviously we'll keep with the same architecture and make sure that that's going to be a good neighbor as well. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. I brought just a couple of renderings. These aren't final, but CSO is our architect. So we're looking to build a beautiful building. This looks like an all brick building. It's actually not. The top will be, it'll be like a wood finish. So it'll blend well, again, with the natural setting that we're in, and just kind of play off of the look and feel of that. And then go ahead and go to the next slide. Planning on putting in a nice size, almost an acre, if I remember correctly, retention pond there, and then just, you know, again, building out that in the landscape so it fits in and provides a great space for our employees who they love being outside. They love getting out on the Monon, which is where our current facility sits. And so this is just going to be an improvement and offer them more ability to do that. We're talking about putting some walking trails through the woods there, and hopefully we'll have to work with the city on this, maybe even having a trailhead that can tie into that Natalie Wheeler Trail to provide public access as well. So that's a little bit about our project. We're very excited about it. I think I have one last slide, just thank you. And we plan to be back at a later meeting, I believe later this month, with a formal proposal for you all to consider. And thanks for your time this evening. We're excited about being a Westfield company.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking time.
Appreciate it, Tracy. Mayor, do you have any other final comments before we move on to business?
You know, just in summation, as we planned our economic development strategy for many, many years, this is exactly the kind of business, the software business, the advanced manufacturing, the sports hospitality. Those are the keys that we're building this economy around, and we're just very pleased to have them here. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to old business. First up on the agenda is ordinance 20-14, amending certain human resource policies and procedures. This is up for adoption consideration tonight. Brian, do you have any additional comments for the council?
I do not, sir. I've received no additional questions or requests for information either.
Perfect. Council members, any questions or final thoughts or comments? Hearing none. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Somebody has to make a motion and second it.
Sorry, you're absolutely right. Do we have a motion for adoption?
Motion to approve, Jake Gilbert.
Thanks, Jake. Do we have a second?
Second, Cindy Spoljarek.
Thanks, Cindy. We got a first from Jake, a second from Cindy.
Now
Cindy,
I can call the roll. Okay, Scott Fry,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Cindy Spoljarek,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes,
Mike.
sorry, I was muted.
Okay. That's okay. That motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Next up, Resolution 20-121, Fiscal Plan for Ordinance 20-15, Chatham Hills Phase 17. This also is up for adoption consideration tonight. Pam, any additional comments or thoughts?
Yeah, so I can introduce this and the next petition, which is Phase 17 of Chatham Hills annexation, a 100% voluntary annexation, along with the associated fiscal plan for about 45.5 acres to be part of Chatham Hills subdivision. This is located on the west side of Horton Road and south of 206th Street. Table 5 of the resolution shows the estimated net impact for this phase of being approximately $24,500 over the next 5 years. Public hearing for this was held May 11th, and it is eligible for your adoption this evening. I do have the petitioner here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Pam. Any questions for Pam or the petitioner? Hearing none, do I have a motion for this resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have a second?
Second, Troy Patton.
Thanks, Troy. Hearing a first and a second, Cindy, would you please call the roll?
Mike Johns,
Yes,
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Pam, you're still up. Go ahead and continue with ordinance 20-15, please.
Yes, so this is the associated 100% voluntary annexation for the fiscal plan you just voted on. So no additional comments on that.
Excellent. Any questions or comments from city councilors? All right, hearing none. Do we have a motion?
Mike Johns, so moved.
Second?
Scott Fry, second.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Scott. Hearing a first and second, Cindy, would you please call the roll?
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, Resolution 20-122, Fiscal Plan for Ordinance 20-16, Chatham Hills Phase 18. Pam, it's still yours.
Yes, so this is Phase 18 of Chatham Hills, again, 100% voluntary annexation and the fiscal plan for approximately 38.5 acres as part of Chatham Hills PUD. This area is located on the east side of Horton Road and the north side of 199th Street. Table 5 of the resolution shows that the net impact for this phase of annexation is just over $26,000 over the next 5 years. Again, public hearing was held May 11th, and this is eligible for your adoption this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Any comments or questions from the council? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve, Troy.
Thanks, Troy. We have a second?
Second, Jake.
Thanks, Jake. Hearing a first and a second, Cindy, can you please call the roll?
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert.
Yes. Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thanks, Cindy. Moving on, ordinance 20-16. Pam, still you.
Yes, so again, thank you. This is the associated annexation for the fiscal plan that you just voted on, so no additional comments.
Excellent. Councilors, any questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Jake Gilbert, so moved.
Any seconds?
Troy
Scott
Patton,
Fry,
yes.
second.
I'll go Scott Fry.
We'll go
Second.
with Scott. So we got first from Jake, a second from Mr. Fry. Cindy, could you call the roll, please?
Cindy Spalgeri,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yep.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Appreciate it, Cindy. Next on the agenda, ordinance 20-17, City of Westfield to vacate public ways. Brian.
Thank you, sir. Looks like this was introduced back in April. It is set for a public hearing, which was duly advertised tonight, to consider vacating these public ways identified in ordinance 20-17. As previously explained, these right-of-ways, which were reserved to the city, are no longer of any use to the city, and in fact will impede development if they're not vacated. I believe John Nail, the city engineer, is online. He can talk to the particulars. But tonight we first have to have the public hearing, and it can be considered tonight.
Appreciate it. We'll open up the public hearing at 7:46 p.m. Brian, do we have any cards or anybody who wants to speak?
I believe Kevin is still receiving any comments that would have come in during the meeting, and he can speak to that.
Mr. Todd?
Yeah, this is Kevin. Todd, I've received no comments to date.
Anybody on the phone, any of the 34 participants want to speak on this? All right, hearing none, we will close the public hearing at 7:47 p.m. Councilors, any questions or comments?
No.
Hearing none, it is available for adoption consideration. So do I have a motion? This is Scott. I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 20-17.
Second, Jake Gilbert.
Thank you, Jake. Got a first and a second. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeri,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Cindy. Last item of old business is the add-on ordinance 20-13, Junction PUD Amendment 4. Pam, you're back on.
Yes, this is again Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening, you'll be considering the Junction Planned Unit Development District Amendment. This 3-acre site is located at 17655 Shamrock Boulevard and was zoned at the Junction PUD back in 2014. The proposed amendment would add multifamily dwellings as a permitted use, as well as increase the minimum and maximum building heights in the District 3. The petitioner had been in contact with the Grand Junction Task Group, and a letter of support was included as an exhibit when this item was on the agenda, as was the public comments received and the petitioner's response to issues raised at the May 6th public hearing. This item comes to you with an unfavorable recommendation from the Plan Commission's last meeting with a vote of 5-4. I'm not sure if the petitioners had a chance to call into this meeting, but they may be available, and if they are, have some comments. Thank you.
Pam, did you say I had an unfavorable?
Unfavorable, yes, with a vote of 5-4.
This is Cindy Spalgeri. I thought it was 5-4 for it.
I agree. I think it was.
Yep, Pam, this
I
is John
believe that
Nail.
is
It was favorable 5-4, I believe.
It was, okay. It was a typo on my part, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Cindy. I appreciate that. Unless somebody has called Birch, I'm assuming he's not on this call.
We have notified the petitioners. I'm not sure if they've called in.
Okay. Any comments from the petitioner before we move on to comments from the council? Hearing none. Councilors, any comments?
Yeah, this is Mike Johns, and I'd like to give my comments. First of all, I think that Shamrock Land Acquisitions is a great company and a great member of the Westfield family. They've done some wonderful projects in the past, and but not all projects, I guess, are, in my opinion, that great. And unfortunately, I can't support this one. And I can't support it for a number of reasons, basically three primary reasons. The first being safety concerns. I'm concerned about the increased traffic and safety issues along Shamrock Boulevard there. According to the staff report, these concerns are also shared by the police, the school administration, and the Board of Public Works Department. To quote staff, quote, all three departments were concerned about traffic from both a quantity and a safety perspective. I'm also concerned with the height of the building. The ordinance in place currently proposes a maximum 40-foot building. This ordinance would increase that height from 3 stories to 4 stories and increase the height from 40 to 53 feet. I've received calls and letters from several of the adjoining neighbors who abut the property and who are not in favor of that. They tell me that they feel like this was a compromised issue that they agreed to 6 years ago and thought that it had been resolved at that time, and just think that the additional 53 feet will put their house in a shadow for the better part of the day. And the third thing really that I'm looking at is I really don't think that, in my opinion, we need additional workforce family housing at that location. We already have 2,428 existing apartment units in Westfield. We've got an additional 1,241, that's 50% more that have already been approved or permitted. And so for the last 6 years, I guess we as a city have been expecting that we'd have assisted living and independent senior living built on that site. And we've grown to expect that, and I really don't think that it's a good location for what the petitioner has said as, quote, large family, unquote, housing. So for those reasons, I am going to vote against this project this evening.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments from counselors?
Yeah, I had seen some documentation that showed about traffic. My top concern was traffic, but it showed that there would actually be less traffic under this plan than the original purpose, which is coming. So if that is true, then I'm taking that to mean that there's going to be more cars if we vote this down. So I'd like to hear from whoever put that study together from the city, just to make sure I'm understanding correct.
Yep, this is John Nail with the City of Westfield City Engineer. I think that there's maybe a little confusion there. I mean, I think that when a project goes in there, there will be an increase in traffic. What I had relayed to the petitioner and to our staff is that the big driver of traffic for this project is the first floor retail, in particular, a coffee shop or something along those lines. The traffic congestion that occurs at this location is mainly at the school pickup and drop-off times. Whether there's a third or fourth floor to the building, the residential component of this project is a very low driver of trip generation. It's based on number of units. So if all things equal, a building footprint is the same, whether it's 3 stories or 4 stories, then yes, a 4-story building will have more traffic overall. But if you're choosing between a large footprint building that's 3 stories and a smaller footprint building that's 4 stories and has equal number of units, the trip generation is the same. And I want to just clarify that point for council tonight.
John, I appreciate, this is Scott Fry, I appreciate that clarification. I do have one question for you. Was the study done based on an age-restricted community versus a non-age-restricted community, or was it simply on the number of units?
So just to be clear, we did not do a full traffic study. I use our IT trip generation manual to look at trip generation in general. The age-restricted community that we looked at was essentially a detached retirement living community versus a multifamily community or a multifamily building. Essentially, the retirement community had about 20, I believe it was about 20 to 25% less. I don't have my notes right in front of me tonight because I wasn't expecting this to be on the agenda, but I would point out that I believe it's about 25% less for the age restricted. Now, again, that's just looking at the residential component. I want to emphasize that the overall traffic generation for this project is driven by the first floor retail, in particular, anything that would be like a coffee shop or something like that, that would add to the traffic coinciding with pickup and drop off at the schools. So again, for the residential component, age restricted versus non-age restricted, I think there's about a 20 to 25% decrease in traffic if it is a retirement type situation.
And this is Pam Howard. Kevin Todd has the staff report pulled up right now, which does include those numbers. So the numbers that Mr. Nail provided to us is 3.7 trips per unit for the age restricted and 5.4 for non-age restricted. And the unit counts that we used in those calculations were the ones provided by the petitioner.
But Pam, wasn't there a paper that showed there were going to be less units in the new project? That's what I thought I saw. I mean, since we're doing it this way, I don't know if we can pull that up.
Pam, do you recall which exhibit that was?
That would be in the response to the issue list. And it was, I think, the last page or toward the last page.
There was a page that had counts. It was a horizontal page.
I'm pretty sure it's
It was 5 times. It's that page right there.
Yep.
What does this page say, Pam? Maybe you can explain this to us.
Let me get it pulled up so I can see a little better. So yes, so this is what the petitioner is proposing as far as the unit count. So they have non-age restricted and then senior living. As far as unit numbers, the total residents that would be living there and the total cars that they would presume to have. So in the age restricted apartments, they would build 130 units. In the non-age restricted, they would build 100. And the number of cars that comes out to they have in the final column. So those calculations were all done by the petitioner, so I can't say how they got to their number of people per unit and number of cars per unit.
So just as clarification, make sure I'm understanding this correctly, there's a difference in unit occupancy, estimated unit occupancy of 3. Is that correct? 212 versus 215?
Correct, yes, the number of people.
Thank you.
So this is Scott. I've got a few comments that I would like to make. First off, it does appear that there are less units. It's negligible, but if we move forward and vote this down, basically we're inheriting a PUD that has a slightly higher per unit or total unit count than what we would get in PUD, but slightly lower. I'm not a fan of this development. I'm even less of a fan of the original development. I'm not sure why we approved that to begin with. I just don't like any kind of housing of that sort that close to the schools, especially with the traffic issues we have. But if we vote this down, we go back to the original PUD, and I think this second one that's in front of us now is a better project. It has a better tax revenue generation for the city. I think the traffic impacts are negligible. I think that when you look at the number of retirement communities that have been approved as of late, I don't really think there's a market. I don't know for sure, but I'm skeptical there's a market for what would be a third development for senior citizens here in Westfield. And just quite frankly, you know, Birch, he lives in my district. He lives in his community. He's done a lot for the city, and I just don't like the way this feels. I know I did not do a thorough analysis of this PUD because once I knew he was pulling it, I didn't give it the consideration I probably should have if I'd known it was in front of us. And I just don't like the way this feels, you know, treating somebody who's invested in our community with this last minute change and throwing it up there for a vote. Add to that, I just feel like you know, we committed as a council when we came in that we were going to, like past councils, we were going to take the vote from APC with the seriousness that it deserves. They've come through it in fine detail. They've approved it. And because I haven't had a chance to get a more thorough analysis, I'm going to go ahead and vote yes, hoping that the APC did their job, as I know they do because I've been on it, and go with their initial recommendation. Any questions or concerns?
I have some comments. This is Cindy Spoljarek. I've looked at this in detail at the Planning Commission and now, and I do have concerns. You know, adding that extra story does fully impact the neighbors to the east. And I know people say it's an issue, but it is, and it is for those folks, and we've not been contacted by them. When this project was envisioned with 3 stories, and you know, some thought that was even a little high then, we went for it, and there's only a small buffer yard there. It's not a huge buffer yard. And so the overall impact is even more sizable when you start talking about things like proximity slope and those kind of things. So I do have concerns there. And I have more concerns in the fact that the PUD also doesn't have things like standards for a parking structure. So as I started to think about this and how it could develop, there's actually very little that we understand about what could actually happen with this building. And the fact that you could only really turn left out onto Shamrock, I mean, otherwise you're going into the school's campus, and I think that creates a problem, is a concern for me with this amount of development. So you're talking about both the commercial and then the residential uses all being impacted by having to make a left turn essentially out onto Shamrock, which would now even be supposedly bigger, which again, we don't have an agreement that all parties would be willing to contribute to right-of-way and to reconstruct that, and we still wind up with a bottleneck at the schools until that's done too. So there's a multitude of reasons I don't think this is ready, and I don't think this is probably the right project for there at this time. So thanks.
So I guess my answer to that was, this is Jake, when it was withdrawn, I'm fine with how everybody voted. It's not a perfect project. I agree with Scott actually on a lot of things. I just think it's better than the previous project. But whether we vote it up or vote it down, like I thought there would be more time to explore some of those questions. You know, I got an email from a petitioner this afternoon, and I would have liked to have known a little more. If I knew we were voting tonight, then I guess I would have made better contact and done a better job serving that citizen. But since it was pulled, I've just never seen anything like this. I guess I just think it's Bush League process, and I don't know, people who are developers, maybe this is regular and they feel okay with it, but I think it's disrespectful. And it's disrespectful to us as a council too. Scott Willis is saying he's supposed to have a conversation with Dr. Great and doesn't have that conversation before we put our name on the line on a vote. So thank goodness I looked at everything in advance. But even after this got pulled, there were multiple emails that I got that I would have liked to have talked to those people before I made my vote. So for us to put this back on here after it was pulled, I just have zero understanding how that's quality government.
Brian, this is Scott Fry. I want to jump in. Help me understand what the process is if this is approved tonight, and what the process is if this is rejected tonight. What is the process then for the developer?
If it's approved tonight, it's approved, and he can go forward with these changes as included in this ordinance. If it's denied, as in a vote, turning it down, it's just defeated. The old PUD is in force. If he wants to make any other suggestions or changes, he would have to start over. And
this is Scott. Is there any other comments or questions from the council?
Yeah, this is Troy Patton. I'm gonna make a comment since it seems to be a free-for-all comment league. All right. So Jake and Scott, I understand your frustration with this. You know, the one thing I would say is that, you know, I'm not defending Birch or not defending Birch, but at the same time, look, if you don't like it and you have concerns about it, why wouldn't we go ahead and, I mean, whether you vote yes or no, it doesn't matter, and whether it passes or doesn't pass. But if it doesn't pass, why not just go back to Birch then and say, hey, let's work with you to either try to get the first one right or try to figure out a different use for the property instead of dragging it out. And I mean, at the end of the day, he can take something else back to the APC anyways. So, I mean, you know, I don't see the point in delaying it. I don't see the point in having it. Either way, I can take it or leave it. It doesn't matter. I mean, it wouldn't change my vote this week, next week, or in 1 month. I understand your frustrations, but at the same time, I think it's best to either just get on with it, tell them what we like or don't like. If it's not going to pass anyways, you know, or if it does pass anyways, then at least he knows. And we're done, and we can help him to get something else done. Like you said, they've done a good job on other projects. He had someone else reach out to me. He didn't call me, but he had someone else reach out to me, and I told them, I said, hey, you know what? I really like it. Guess what? I just don't like it in that spot. And this is another reason, I will add this in one last kind of parting comment, is that this is where we need sunset provisions. Because here we have a project that was approved back in 2014. It's 7 years ago. Things have changed. You know, it was the initial intent that the other building was going to be torn down in front. So, I mean, you know, it's a perfect, legitimate reason why we need sunset provisions, and that's it.
I guess what I would ask, and maybe this is a great compromise, maybe it's not, because one of the things that I had committed to Dr. Great when I talked to her on Sunday briefly, and in my follow-up conversation with Birch, was that, hey, can we get everybody together, get it back to APC, and come up with a plan that is good for everybody? I mean, Birch bought this land. He has the right to develop it, but we as a community have the right to have the right development. I'd hate to see Birch start over. It's a huge money suck for him. And I just think that the right move at this stage would be to send it back to APC and see what they can come up with, if anything better, that can come back to us for a vote. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but I think that's probably a better approach. And I think it treats Birch a little bit more fairly than popping us on the calendar and voting on it when a few of us haven't had a chance to do the due diligence at work. I mean, again, at the end of the day, APC has had it. They've spent a lot of time on it, and they approved it. So I'm reluctant because I haven't done the due diligence. I feel obligated that's what APC gets paid to do. And they certainly have spent a lot more time on it than I have, especially knowing that it wasn't coming to a vote. Well, that's my comment.
This is Mike. I'd like to see us move forward on this and take a vote this evening. and be done with it.
All right, any other comments or?
Yes, this is Jake. So again, to me, this has nothing to do with Birch. This is about just all these other instances where something's been pulled off our agenda. I don't remember us bringing it up and voting on that. I just feel like it's not about finishing this project off or whatever. It's more about us being quality counselors and being prepared. I don't like that staff was put up here unprepared. I mean, they're like, well, we don't know. I mean, Pam Howard, Jonathan Nail, I don't like doing that to them either. You know, Kevin Todd, I just feel like that was unprofessional to do to them, as unprofessional to do to me and all of us as a city council. I'm done. That's it. I'm ready whenever you guys are.
I've got one final comment. I would just ask in the future, if the council wants to do that, please let all the council members know that we're going to be doing this. I found out about it at 6:59 p.m. and it just doesn't feel right. So I've just asked for respect in the future, that if you think this is something you want to go down, certainly you have that right to make the motion. I'm not saying you don't, but please communicate that to all of us so that none of us get caught off guard like this. And it may have been a last minute decision by those that presented it. I'm fine with that, but I just asked for that courtesy.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I totally agree. This is Mike. Unfortunately, I was on the phone with Brian Zagers until about 6:55 this evening before we reached an agreement there. So do better next time.
Appreciate it. All right, do I have a motion?
Hang on, Scott. This is Kevin Todd here. I just wanted, before you vote, just want to respond to something real quick that I heard in the conversation. There was for what it's worth, there was a comment about about parking garage standards, not having those. The underlying, the initial PUD ordinance for this area does include a section on multi-story parking garages. There are a handful of standards that would apply to this site. They were not modified for the amendment that's before you this evening, but there are some standards in place. I just want to put that out there for some clarification. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. And that was me asking about the parking standards, and I guess it was more of a specific thing. When we approved this years ago, at least the way I always thought this was supposed to go is the parking garage would probably be on the west, or integrated into, more of a setting for a bigger project, especially if on the east of Shamrock it was going to get redeveloped as a whole with that front parcel. And now not understanding even how that parking garage would interplay, what would be seen from right away and neighbors and all that. I mean, there's so many things there I don't think that were contemplated originally. So that's what I meant by not having the standards, is we had no visual or all of the building elevations that would actually be visible. So thank you.
All right, any other comments? All right, let's move this to a motion, please.
Okay. Yeah, this is Mike Johns. I'd like a motion to deny ordinance 20-13.
Do I have a second?
Second, Cindy Spoljarek.
Got a first from Mike, got a second from Cindy. Cindy, can you call the roll, please?
Okay, Troy Patton.
Okay, I'm voting no against the project. I want to make sure.
Vote yes, then Troy, you're voting to deny.
That's what I was making sure. That's why I said that, because yes to deny. How about that?
Okay. Scott Fry.
I cannot approve that project as it stands.
Okay, so you're voting yes to deny this, right?
Yes to deny.
Okay, Cindy Spoljarek.
Yes.
Jake Gilbert.
No.
So, okay. Scott Willis.
No.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
was that a yes to deny?
Yes. To deny.
Where do you guys see the minutes on this ordinance 20-13? So we have 4 yes and 2 no. So motion to deny is 4-2.
All right, moving on to new business. Ordinance 20-20, 100% voluntary annexation for Chatham Hills Phase 19. Pam, you have the mic.
Yeah, so again, Pam Howard, Community Development Department, before you this evening for an introduction and public hearing. 100% voluntary annexation and associated, or not without the associated fiscal plan at this time, for approximately 79 acres to be part of the Chatham Hills subdivision. This is located on the south side of 206th Street, west of Horton Road, and is immediately adjacent to Phase 17, which you just adopted this evening. Again, this is a public hearing tonight and will be before you in July for adoption consideration along with the fiscal plan. The petitioner is here. They do not plan to present, but are available for questions, as am I if you have any of the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. This is open for a public hearing this evening. I'd like to open this up at 8:16 p.m. Kevin, do you have any cards?
We do not.
Anybody on the phone, any 33 participants want to make a comment? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing at 8:17 p.m. Thank you, Pam. This will be open for adoption on July 13th. Next ordinance 20-21, issuing economic development bonds at Spring Mill Center. Brian?
Yes, sir. This is the, okay, there we go. My partner, Catherine Finella, is on, and she can explain this to you, but this is the last step in issuing the bonds for the Spring Mill Center project.
Yes, thank you, Brian. This is Catherine Finella with Creek DeVault. As Brian mentioned, this is the last step in completing the issuance of the bonds for the Spring Mill project. If you remember, the Redevelopment Commission established a TIF allocation area for the Spring Mill Center project. The bonds issued under the ordinance are economic development bonds under the Indiana statute. They will be purchased by the developer, and they are payable solely from the tax increment generated and collected in the Spring Mill Center TIF area. So there is no obligation of the city at all. If you have any questions, be happy to answer.
Appreciate that. So this is not open for a public hearing, is that correct, Brian? Or?
No, sir, no hearing.
All righty, any comments or questions from council members? Hearing none. Appreciate it. Let's move on to ordinance 20-22, Grassy Branch Marketplace PUD Amendment 1. Dane?
Good evening, council. For the record, Dane Crabtree with the Community Development Department. The item before you this evening is the introduction to Amendment 1 of the Grassy Branch Marketplace PUD, which is the commercial area at the northeast corner of Grassy Branch Road and State Road 32. This amendment would apply only to Lot 3, which is where an inline tenant building is currently under construction north of the Planet Fitness building. This amendment would permit the type of screening and fencing shown in the proposed PUD ordinance for the outside storage area of the Ace Hardware, rather than what is required by the UDO. The exhibits show a 2-foot masonry knee wall with 6 additional feet of wrought iron-like fencing, which are both explicitly permitted by the State Road 32 overlay. However, the UDO's business district screening requirements require a solid wall no less than 7 feet in height. Additionally, access to the storage area is proposed to be from the north, which is technically a front yard as it would face a private street. Entrances to outside storage areas are not permitted to be positioned toward a front yard per the UDO. This item is scheduled to receive its public hearing at the July 6th Plan Commission meeting. Justin Olashuk of American Structure Point, is present on the call this evening. If there are any questions, though he does not plan to present, and I'm available if there are questions for staff. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Dane. Any questions from the council? Hearing none, this will be going to APC for a public hearing on July 6th. Moving on, ordinance 20-23, Bridgewater PUD amendment, Culvers. Pam?
Yes, thank you. Pam Howard with Community Development Department. Before you this evening for introduction, I have an amendment to the Bridgewater Planned Unit Development District to accommodate a new Culver's restaurant. This 2-acre site is located on the west side of Gray Road, just north of 146th Street, and was zoned the Bridgewater PUD back in 2004. The proposed amendment would modify the permitted uses to allow a fast food restaurant and also incorporate a concept plan and character exhibits for the site. Again, this is for introduction tonight and would go to Plan Commission for public hearing on July 6th. I do have Eric Douthit with Church, Hiddle, and Antrim here to present, after which both he and I will be available for questions. Thank you.
Eric?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
This is Eric Douthit, Church, Hiddle, and Antrim, 116 North Union here in Westfield. What's proposed to go in this particular site is a new Culver's. The proposed PUD amendment entitles this specific use with this specific site plan and these specific building elevations. I'd point out any substantial change to the improvements in this proposed PUD shown in this amendment would require the owner to return to the City Council and Plan Commission for consideration and approval. We are planning to have our neighborhood meeting at the Bridgewater Golf Club on either June 29th or June 30th. We haven't nailed down the specific time or location, but we'll certainly let council know and staff know well in advance so that they can plan to attend. I look forward to presenting this to APC and getting its take on how we can better improve that corner and move forward. Available for any additional specific questions if you've got them.
Thank you, Eric. Council members, any questions for Mr. Douthit? All right, hearing none, this will be moving on to APC for a public hearing on July 6th. Thanks, Eric, appreciate it. Next up, Resolution 20-125, Common Council of the City of Westfield, Indiana, finding that property owners are in substantial compliance for tax abatement purposes. Kai, you're up.
Good evening, councilors. Kai Chuck from the Economic Development Department. I present to you this evening the tax abatement compliance forms for your consideration. These are annual compliance CF1 forms from companies with active tax abatement agreements. The annual compliance is to confirm that there is continual job creation and investment as acknowledged upon the original agreements. Upon further review of the submitted CF1 forms, I find no irregularities. And on screen, we have the tax abatement estimated value for 2020 in that column there. At the bottom as the estimated value for 2020 for the tax abatement. I'm happy to answer any questions from the council.
Appreciate it, Kai. Council members, any questions for Kai?
This is Troy. Hey, Kai, how do you confirm that they're in compliance with, like, again, some of these I don't know, but if they say, hey, we're going to hire this many people or that, whatever, to get this tax abatement, how do you confirm that they're in compliance?
It's on the CF1 firm of how many employees they have hired and the investments they have done for the year that they submitted their CF1 form, and we compare that to the actual estimates they had submitted for the original agreement.
Okay. I was just curious. So thank you.
I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. If your mic is not muted, please do so. All right, any other questions? All right, this is up for adoption consideration tonight. Do I have a motion? this is Scott. I'll make a motion to approve resolution 20-125. Common Council of the City of West Bend, Indiana, find that property owners are in compliance for tax abatement purposes. Do I have a second?
Second, Cindy Spolgera.
Thank you, Cindy. We got a first from Scott, Scott Willis, a second from Cindy. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Cindy. Next up, resolution 20-126, Common Council of City of Westfield, and regarding declaration of official intent to reimburse expenditures. Brian.
Thank you. I'll just make a slight introduction, but most of the explanation will probably have to come from John Rogers. He understands this much better than I do. I drafted this resolution, which I call just a reimbursement resolution. And what it does is presupposes an upcoming general obligation bond in the amount of $5 million. This resolution allows us to use funds on hand to be reimbursed by the bonding when that comes out. Now, the $5 million bond that this resolution anticipates is part of a program of fiscal integrity that John put into place some 7-8 years ago, and originally was used to offset vehicle prices. The need this time is in the purchase of equipment that has broken down and is in need of replacement. But to the money and how it flows, please let John explain that.
John, if you could, please, that'd be great. I know you also have Greg here, is that correct?
Sure, yeah, and Greg is on the line, and I'll pass it off to him here real quick, but I want to make sure that I get to a couple of the details before Greg walks you through a general overview of the strategy. We have a couple pieces of equipment in Public Works, a tractor with a sidearm mower and a street sweeper that have some significant issues, and they are part of our obsolescence strategy and are part of the 2020 GEO bond process. Unfortunately, they didn't make it till after October, when we normally start working on getting those proceeds in, and we need to get that equipment fixed immediately. Well, actually, get it replaced. And so the resolution in front of you this evening would allow us to, as Brian mentioned, take proceeds that are cash on hand, get the equipment replaced or fixed or both, and then, in this case, fixed, or I'm sorry, replaced, and then have those dollars put back into the general fund with GEO bond proceeds. And now I'll let Greg kind of walk you through the strategy of the GEO bond process, or this reimbursement resolution. Greg?
Thanks, John, and good evening, and hopefully you can all hear me. So this is a strategy that we put into place for Westfield because of the growing assessed valuation and trying to keep up with the needs of the fastest growing community in the state of Indiana. And so it allows us, we don't go out long term, we go out short term, and it allows us to, as John and Brian eloquently said, to be able to do this now. We will probably not be issuing the bonds until October, but this is required so we keep council informed, and then when the bond document is done, it's not a surprise for you. So something we've done every year for the last several years. It's worked out very, very well, and hopefully you see that it will work for us in the future also. Questions?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, councilors, any questions for Greg or John?
Yeah. Hey, this is Troy Patton, and you know, I'll reserve maybe some of my questions for offline. But you know, the one thing I would say, just a couple comments is, you know, when I looked at the budget last year, I don't recall seeing the $5 million. Maybe you guys can point it to me. The $5 million as part of our funding plan in the budget last year in terms of proceeds. That's maybe number one. Number two, you know, I mean, as Greg alluded to, you know, we're the fastest growing community, the fastest growing assessed, you know, property values. I don't understand why we would entertain perpetual debt to you know, to fund simple things that, you know, we should have enough cash flow to, you know, set aside to acquire this additional property. That, because I mean, unless I'm hearing it incorrectly, and maybe I am, is that, you know, we're issuing this for, you know, new equipment, which, you know, we should have been setting up a depreciating fund anyways for, so that way we don't have to continue to borrow. Otherwise, we're going to keep borrowing in current dollars for the replacement of equipment over and over and over again. So, I mean, and again, we can address some of this offline, but you know, I'm somewhat interested in those two facts as probably well as a few others. But
and so, Troy, if I may, there were several questions in there, and so number one, because of the way the tax structure works with the growth quotient, that we can only go up a certain amount, and as you know, I guess you know, this was built in. This is built into the sustainability. Now the $5 million is part. This is going to be built into the 2021 budget, the repayment of it. And John, I don't recall the exact number of years. Are we 5 year or 7 years on this?
This is 5 year.
5 year. And so the plans are to make it work within the growing assessed valuation, get the debt paid off even before the equipment is self-destructing, budget it, the repayment in the 2021 budget, keep as much cash on hand as we can for what you and I talked about a week or so ago, which is could be very rough times. And I'm not saying that we would do this each and every year going forward. It would be highly probable if the AV would start declining, that number one, we wouldn't be growing then as much and the demand for this wouldn't be as high, and therefore the need may not even exist. Does any of that make sense, kind of play in?
some of it, no. Like I said, we can discuss this. I mean, you know, offline. Again, I don't want to put you guys on the spot because I mean, I think so.
This is Scott. If I could inject here, and Troy and I talked about this over the weekend. I think what might be an appropriate next step is to send this to the Finance Committee and let Troy, Scott, and Joe have a more detailed conversation prior to the adoption consideration, and then they can come back to the council with the recommendations prior to that vote. Does that make sense, Troy, from your standpoint? Or?
I think that's a good idea personally, but. But I mean, if the other city councilors don't want to do that, then I'm okay with that too. I mean, I don't, you know, it's not what I want. I mean, it's what, you know, our group wants. So
I would support that.
I'd support.
All right. Any other questions from anybody else before we move on? Greg, thank you for jumping on at such late notice. John and Brian appreciate the presentation. And again, this will be up for adoption on July 13th, and Troy will reach out to Kim to get it on the agenda for the Finance Committee coming up. Moving on.
Thank you. Sounds really good.
Perfect. Moving on, 2020 resurfacing contract. Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everyone. For the record, it's Jeremy Lawler, Director of Public Works. In accordance with Ordinance 20-03, we are bringing this contract to you all for approval as it is over the $150,000 threshold mark. Specifically, it is our 2020 resurfacing program, which was publicly bid. There were 7 bidders. The low bidder would be Midwest Paving. The total bid amount is $1,985,689.80. A couple other points worth note. Engineer's estimate was $2.1 million, so we got some really good competitive bids on this. And additionally, 50% of this contract is reimbursable by the Community Crossings matching grant that we received a few, I guess, months ago now, of $1 million. And the way that works is NDOT splits 50-50 up to the $2 million mark. So we'll lose roughly $7,000 because we got such good bids. But either way, I think it's a great situation. So just asking for you all to approve this contract. It has previously been approved by the Board of Works, which is technically the contract approving body. So as soon as you give us the go-ahead, we can get started on the resurfacing program.
Thanks, Jeremy. Counselors, any comments, any thoughts?
Nope.
I'd like
Looks
to
good.
say something.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Oh, I just wanted to say it is so great that Crestview is finally getting their roads redone. They have needed it. We've had problems over there, and this money, especially with the Community Crossings grant, is allowing them to get that. So very appreciative for our folks out of Crestview.
Yeah, we are certainly happy to, the struggles we went through with the first half, and it's taken us this long to be able to build up the capital in order to manage that second half of that project, which is certainly not a typical resurfacing project. It's going to be a bit more difficult than that, but we'll get it taken care of and get it behind us.
Yes, well, thank you so much for that.
Sure.
All right, any other comments? All right, this is up for a vote. Do I have a motion?
This is Troy Patton. I move to approve.
Thanks, Troy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Who is that? I'm sorry. Is that Jake?
Jake.
Thanks, Jake. So we have a first by Troy, a second by Jake Gilbert. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it. Last, under new business, signing authority to Jeremy Lawler for the East Street North Extension Construction Contract.
Thank you all very much. Again, Jeremy Lawler, Director of Public Works. As you know, we've been working for about 5 years on the East Street North Extension Construction Project, which extends up through what will be North Point as soon as we get this road done. We are very thankful to be at the bidding stage of this project. To make you aware that with this being an MPO funded project, it is technically an NDOT project that goes through the NDOT bidding and award process. We committed long ago to 20% of the construction match. I am asking that if bids come back and are deemed awardable by NDOT on a project that's estimated at $8.1 million, that you all give me the authority to approve and process an invoice, and subsequently the clerk to cut the check prior to it getting docket approval by council. And the value in this is the bid the letting is what it's technically called. The bid opening for this project is approximately July 7th. NDOT will have to review and go through their typical process of approval, which means we will miss docket approval for the July council meeting. So us being able to do this will allow NDOT to issue the notice to proceed approximately a month prior to what we would if we went through our standard process. So cuts a month out of a project that is very vital to the economic development of the city. We just want to move it ahead as quickly as possible. And I would certainly entertain any questions associated with that.
Thank you, Jeremy. Councilors, any questions? Hey, Jeremy, I have one question. So if it comes back, say 15 million, what happens then?
Not even 15 million. If it's 10, I can't remember the exact number, and NDOT has a little bit of leeway, but if it's more than 10% over the engineer's estimate of 8.1 million, they will throw all the bids out and rebid the project. And if necessary, we would have to value engineer, or the other alternative, which the city can't really financially support, is we would cover more than the 20% match. But we've spent a lot of time. There's a great engineer on the project. So we're pretty comfortable with the estimate.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other comments from councilors?
And I guess additionally to that, if it does come in over budget and is thrown out, obviously this means nothing and we're starting over. So it's not committing you to more than what we committed to a long time ago, which is 20% of the total construction of the project based on the engineer's estimate.
All right. This is up for a vote this evening. So do I have a nomination here?
This is Scott Fry, so moved.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have a second?
Troy Patton, second.
Thank you, Troy. So we got a first from Scott Fry, a second from Troy. Cindy, would you call the roll?
Scott Willett.
Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
Can you say it
Jake
again?
Gilbert.
Yes.
Jake Gilbert. Mike Johns.
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Yes.
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Appreciate that, Cindy. All right, that wraps up new business. Last two things on the agenda for tonight is city council comments. To make this quick and we don't step on each other, I'll just call each councilor's name and say yes or no if you've got comments. If you have comments, feel free to. Let's start with Jake Gilbert.
No comment.
Troy Patton.
Nope.
Cindy.
Not this time, thanks.
Scott Fry.
Negative.
Mike Johns.
Well, I've got just a couple comments real quick.
Yeah,
I
go
want to
ahead.
give you guys the Advisory Plan Commission follow-up from the last meeting. So the APC met last Wednesday night. We had one old business item, which was the Junction PUD. We had two new public hearing items that were both related, both having to do with Urban Vines and the Heron Holdings. So the first one really should have been heard second. It was kind of presented out of order. The first ordinance spoke about redoing the bathrooms at the Urban Vines location, but that all is really predicated upon ordinance number 2, which is the approval of the Hoosier Hills. The Hoosier Hills there was presented just kind of real quick. There was a lot of concern when it was presented. The petitioner had taken liberty of quoting the UDO for the definitions of agro-tourism and cabin/barn home, but he added and deleted his own words without letting anybody know that the definitions have been changed. That raised some concerns with the APC members. and also the APC members in general, we were all concerned with the proposal kind of lacked clarity and detail and supporting information. So we asked the petitioner to go back, rework the plan, and to add some specificity and present it at our next meeting. And that's what we did. That's it.
Thanks, Mike. And Jake, I guess I should come back to you. It wasn't on our agenda tonight, but it should have been. Do you have anything you want to add for the ethics committee? I know we got a meeting coming up.
Just oversight committee meeting coming up this week. We're going to hear from Cindy, our clerk treasurer, about some of the things that we do without divulging too much, but just for transparency on separation of duties and oversight and all the things we do to prevent fraud and theft and things like that.
And if I might add, Jake, I think I just sent a text out to you. I don't have the dial-in info for that, so we need to get that when you get a chance, or have Kim send that to us, whoever's running that.
Will do.
Appreciate it. All right, Mr. Mayor, comments?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I've asked during my time, I would like Jeremy Lawler will update the council on the activities of the Board of Public Works, and Joe Plankus following. Joe Plankus will update all on the activities of the Redevelopment Commission. So, Jeremy, would you go, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had a pretty good Board of Works meeting, and I know we're running late, so I'll try to be quick. Our first action item was a change order to the environmental scope of work for the 161st and Union roundabout. There were some additional services needed there in the amount of $9,100 that are essentially focused on our park that is on the southeast corner of that project. It's Liberty Park. They had to do some additional investigation for protected species and things of that nature. We also early on had some additional work that we needed to do based on the northwest corner being deemed a historical site. So we had to do some archaeological surveys and things of that nature. So board approved $9,000 additional in that scope of work. They also approved the resurfacing contract that we discussed and you approved previously. Action item number 5 was the Alton Witzig not to exceed contract. Alton Witzig does our density testing for our resurfacing program. So they are a third-party testing company to ensure that we are getting the appropriate compact, appropriate materials, and et cetera. Plan. So the $2 million that we're spending, we're getting the best bang for our buck. It's a not to exceed of $10,000. Sorry, and it's a time and materials type of contract. So it may be less than that, but it will not be more than that. Next action item was a RIF credit agreement, so a road impact fee credit agreement with the developer at Gristmill Crossing. Gristmill Crossing commercial development is at the northwest corner of Ditch and State Road 32. As you can see, they've already begun building a phase of Tournament Trail through that area. Because of the 32 overlay requirements, Tournament Trail is deemed reimbursable both by statute and ordinance. So we will be either crediting or reimbursing them depending on the situation. Just over $1.8 million to construct that road. It's worth noting that that development as a whole will generate about a little over $2.6 million in road impact fees. We will get the required infrastructure, but the city will still retain some impact fees in that area. Next action item is one that we're kind of excited about and most don't know, is out at Quaker Park, which aside from our trail system and Grand Park is certainly our most active park. It's the home of the splash park and the new playground. There's a piece of infrastructure out there. It's a public basketball court, very, very underutilized. So Chris McConnell and I have been discussing this for a year or so, and we have decided would like to convert that court into 3 pickleball. Pickleball is a very, very popular sport at all ages, really in that retired community. So we're going to be able to get 3 pickleball courts there. Total build out for converting the basketball, resurfacing that area, and then building the appropriate fencing around the area is $29,000. So that was approved, and we'll get that thing started here pretty soon. There'll be more communications and things coming out about that. There were 2 right-of-way dedications, so developers are required to build passing blisters. As such, the Board of Public Works has to accept the right-of-way dedication for the property that is across the street. Thus, it's not part of their typical platting process. So we go through a standard process for the developer to dedicate that, us to accept it, so that they have the right to construct those improvements. And then we had a reimbursement agreement. It was specific to the East Street construction project that we discussed earlier. If a utility is forced to relocate as a part of one of our capital projects and are in an easement, then we are required to reimburse them for that cost. Likewise, if they're in the right of way, then they have to relocate at their own expense. But this agreement, which is all contemplated in the cost of the overall project, is $100.51 for Vectron to relocate as a part of the East Street project. We had a couple of encroachment permits, and then the board also approved the bids for the equipment that we discussed earlier as a part of the GeoBond reimbursement agreement. We went through it's really an RFQ process to get quotes for a new street sweeper, as well as the tractor, sidearm tractor that we were discussing. Both have failed us at the most important time of the year. We utilize those, so we are urgently looking to move forward with purchase of that equipment, which is all part of our obsolescence strategy associated with equipment and the GeoBond plan that was put forth a number of years ago. So we'll be waiting for approval on those so we can get our mowing back on the road and our street sweeping program back up and running. Other than that, we had a board report or a department reports from police, fire, and I gave a slight report. Mainly the excitement associated with the Monon Bridge opening, albeit a little later than what we'd hoped. It's beautiful, and it is being utilized greatly, and we're glad to have that amenity in the community. So I'll entertain any questions if you have associated with that.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. Joe?
Okay, good evening. Joe Plankus here. Everybody can hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to cover 2 areas tonight. Cover the commission membership changes that we had and the orientation of the new members, and then also a review of our business activities for 2020 year to date. As we know, the council made 2 new appointments at your January meeting, Melissa Risk and Rob Chrisman. So I reached out to Melissa and Rob, and we scheduled an orientation and training session with John Rogers and Tammy Havard in February to discuss RDC activities, TIF districts, and answer any questions they had regarding the RDC. Fortunately, that was an in-person meeting that we held at City Services prior to the COVID-19 lockdown. Later, after the resignation of Rob Chrisman and the filling of that opening by Bob Beaudry, we reached out to Bob and we scheduled a Skype meeting with me, John Rogers, and Bob to provide Bob with the same orientation as we did with Melissa and Rob earlier. Again, a very fruitful session. In regards to RDC activity so far in 2020, we passed 6 resolutions. Resolution 01-2020 was approval of the Colt City construction in Grand Park. This project basically allows for the construction of certain improvements for a new Colt City area to the west of the bleachers by the practice fields that are set up for Colts Camp, which, as we know, we're not going to have this year, unfortunately. Resolution 02-2020 is the approval of an economic development agreement with Heil Group LLC for the Spring Mill Center project. The agreement between the city and the developer spells out all the details for the process to allow for the sale of, not to exceed, $1,525,000 of economic development tax increment revenue bonds to support the project at the northeast corner of State Route 32 and Spring Mill Road, which is directly north of the new Meyer store that's now being constructed, thus removing a former concrete panel manufacturing plant and replacing it with a new multi-use project. Resolution 03-2020 was approval by the RDC for amending the declaratory resolution for the Grand Junction Economic Development Area. Basically, that resolution removes certain parcels from the Grand Junction Economic Development Area and establishes a new sub-area designated as the Spring Mill Center allocation area. Thus, it allows tax increment from this sub-area to be utilized to pay for the bonds referenced in Resolution 02-2020. Resolution 04-2020 was approval by the RDC of a resolution confirming the amending declaratory resolution adopted on April 20th, 2020 for the Grand Junction Economic Development Area. Basically, confirmatory resolution confirming the declaratory resolution. Try to say that fast. 3 times. Resolution of 05-2020, approval of a resolution by the RDC pledging tax increment for the Spring Mill Center project. This action pledges that the tax increment that is developed from the Spring Mill Center project sub-allocation area will be used to pay off the economic development bonds for the Spring Mill Center project. Resolution 06-2020, resolution of the Westfield RDC regarding the determination of excess assessed value. This action passes through to the respective taxing units for the budget year 2020. The assessed value for the Taco Bell, $572,800, and the 21st Amendment store, $1,235,800. It then allows the city to notify the county of our actions. This is one of those annual boilerplate type actions required to be taken by the Westfield RDC. And just a little background, as we know, we used to have a Taco Bell on 32. That got torn down because of the 31 expansion. And the 21st Amendment was just south of 151st. And then that was torn down again with the 31 construction of the ramp system on the west side of 31. So those, to be fair, and by statute, state statute, those tax dollars would continue to go through to the normal taxing bodies because they were assessed the value areas that were in place prior to being torn down. Any questions on any of these items? Seeing none, back to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you both. And Scott, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. All right, I believe that's it for this evening. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Scott Fry, so moved.
Thank you, Scott. We got a second?
Second, Troy Patton.
We'll do this by voice. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passed. Everybody have a great evening and a safe week.
Thank you, you too.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye all.